Burn, baby, burn.
MAGA's mad. They out here burning hats, and Candace Owens saying Trump is trying to play them for stupid.
But the point here is that MAGA revolted against Trump and we won. Trump is playing games. He is. I'm sorry. He is flat out playing games right now. In fact, he's doing that thing that we always felt the press was doing to Trump supporters, thinking that we're stupid.
Could Jeffrey Epstein be their breaking point? You're about to hear from a former MAGA truther who got out, while Rich Logis walked away.
But when did you decide to leave, and why?
Trump mismanaging the pandemic, January 6th, and the stolen election lies were not enough for me. I started to have some doubts for those reasons, but they weren't enough for me to leave. The first accelerant for me was actually not Donald Trump. It was my governor, Ron DeSantis, who in the summer of 2021, when the Delta surge of COVID was ravaging the country, kids were getting sick, kids were dying from COVID, DeSantis platformed anti-vaxxers at his press conferences. And it completely shocked me and stunned me. And I was very confused as to why he did that. And it was shortly thereafter when I started to expand my news and information sources. And as I did that, I found myself struggling with a set of sincerely held beliefs that I was starting to question. There were some other moments as well in my own odyssey, which was a lot of late nights by myself in solitude with just my thoughts and I, really going through this personal turmoil and tumult, trying to reconcile these beliefs that I had with whether they were actually true or not. If you recall, back in February of 2022, the Republican Party called January 6th legitimate political discourse. And I had taken more time to understand January 6th. I didn't support it, but at the time, I remember thinking that I would say publicly that it was hyperbolized into this bigger event than it really was. And most of the people there were peaceful, and the media and Democrats talked about January 6th like we all talked about 9/11 when it happened. But as I delved a little deeper into January 6th, I realized that actually these groups who orchestrated it, whom I thought were hobbyists, were not. And they actually had the blessing of the most powerful person in the history of the world. So I realized this about the riot at the Capitol.
Well, I can ask you this obvious question here. You saw the video of the people
Sure.
knocking out the windows with this and
Sure.
all this stuff they were doing, but yet you were still like,
Wasn't enough for me. I didn't support what they did. I knew it was wrong. It was not a good day. I am a little embarrassed to admit this. I remember thinking what upset me most about that day was that I thought that it was going to hurt our chances for a 2024 comeback.
wow.
That's what I thought most about it. I disagreed with what happened. I knew people who went to the Capitol. I was not invited. Even if I'd been invited, I would not have gone. But I remember thinking, these people are doing this, and it's gonna hurt our chances of coming back with another victory in 2024. And there was one other accelerant for me, and that was on May 24th, 2022, which was the day of the Uvalde, Texas school shooting.
Mm.
And even though Trump was not in office, that was for me the final straw, because I knew exactly what his and what the Republican Party's response was going to be. It was going to be more, don't infringe upon our Second Amendment rights, and it was going to be more about school security and hardening doors and liberals are coming for our guns. I already knew what was going to be said. And I remember listening to the reports that day about Uvalde, knowing that children had died, knowing that others had died. And it was shortly thereafter when I quietly left MAGA. I just couldn't any longer defend the acceptance of avoidable deaths and suffering, and I could no longer justify politically motivated violence. So I did it privately, Angela, where I left, but there was something that was really gnawing at me, which was that I felt that I needed to go public. And the reason I felt that way is because I was always so unapologetically public in my support for Trump. I felt that I needed to reciprocate that, and I needed to be public in my renunciation of MAGA.
So that opened the door for you looking for other
It did.
information. And
It
that
did.
other information is what kind of led you kind of out of MAGA.
After a lot of, after a roller coaster of emotions, vacillating between being in and being out, once I started to expand the kind of information I got, which was very simple, the expansion, I just started consuming more of our daily newspapers. You know, I'm a former reporter. I worked at a weekly newspaper. I was just simply reading digital versions of the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Atlantic, and I was backlinking to all of these articles that I would find, and it could be articles about the same topics I mentioned earlier, about guns and about public education and about demographic changes. And I started thinking as I was reading more and more and becoming less of an ignorant person, as a result of being less ignorant, there's an uncomfortable there are these uncomfortable moments that we have where we start to have to we can either lie to ourselves or we can acknowledge to ourselves that we were wrong about a lot of what we believed. And it was on August 30th of 2022 when I wrote a mea culpa and I published it. And in that apology, I said that I was sorry for my support for Trump, DeSantis, and MAGA, that I was wrong, and that I wanted to apologize to anyone I may have hurt with my words and deeds. I call it my leaving MAGAversary. So I've got another one coming up next month. And the honest to God truth about it, Angela, I never actually thought that anybody would care when I wrote that apology. I did not think anyone would care. And I came to, as soon as it was published, instantaneously there was this deluge of comments from people about, Rich, can you talk to my mother and my brother, my father, my kids? I was completely naive and oblivious to just how many relationships had been torn asunder by this movement and by this person who was, you know, who was someone I was so devoted to. And that was also unnerving to me, that I had to accept that I had been complicit and culpable in so many relationships being torn apart. So I spent the next year telling my story to anyone who'd want to hear it. I was being asked to tell it, and it was from the telling of that story was begotten our current organization, Leaving MAGA, which I founded last year. And we founded Leaving MAGA as a community to counter the toxic community of MAGA, because people need, if people are going to leave, they're going to need an exit ramp. They're going to need a new destination. They're going to need a new community. And that's what we are trying to foster, both online and in person. I will tell you, Angela, that given that we are still in the startup phase, we're only a year and a half old, we have never been busier at Leaving MAGA.
I was going to ask you that because it seems like with this last election, he got so many votes. Is it getting stronger?
I think that there are cracks, and I think those cracks are going to keep showing. The recent stories about Iran, about the Epstein list, people losing their jobs, cuts from the federal government, the inevitable cuts to Medicaid, which is going to disproportionately harm a lot of Trump voting areas. I think a lot of people are going to start questioning their support. And when they do, they need a place to go. And that's why we are positioning Leaving MAGA as a place for them to go.
What is this obsession with Epstein? Why is this rock the Republicans, the MAGA movement so much?
I think a lot of it was there was this big promise
Mhm.
about finding out who was on this list. And then it went from a big promise to a big dud. And the president is trying to deflect from all of this, even though he and surrogates said, we're going to release this list. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to tell the truth about it. And then all of a sudden it goes away. And I think that obsession is largely driven by the fact that a lot of people in MAGA probably believe that it was going to be full of Democratic and Republican enemies who are going to be on this list. But now that it's gone away, or I should say, now that there's that there's no list. I will say that this story does not look like it's going away, though. And I think that people in MAGA are hanging on to this. And for many, they're going to start to have some doubts over the fact that Trump promised this and now there's no delivery of this promise. MAGA.
You talk about you want your leaving MAGA to be like a landing spot for people who leave. I know you said that it's possible for people to leave, but now we're looking at 10 years in.
Hmm.
Isn't it harder at this point? If you've been in it for 10 years now, you got out maybe halfway in, but there are people who've been in it for 10 years. Are they just simply in too deep at this point?
Some are, some are, and I have no illusions that we can extract everybody out of MAGA. But I'm wagering a bet on something, and I think the coming months and years, I'm either going to be proven correct or incorrect on this. I think that there are some around the country who have quietly left, like I did. I think there are many right now who are starting to have doubts, but they're not sure what to do. And that's why being with you helps get us noticed, because the more people who know about us across the country, the more people in MAGA who know about us in particular, as well as friends and family of those still in the thrall of MAGA, the better the chance that they're going to listen to those doubts and they're going to feel the courage enough to come forward to us where we can be a support group for them. So I think that there are people who have left, but they're afraid, and I understand why they're afraid, because they're afraid of judgment, ostracization from others, especially those close to them. And I think there are others with doubts. And for those who have left and for those with doubts, anyone who's hearing this who falls into those categories, I want them to know we're a friendly ear for them.
What do you think the biggest fear is? You said losing people, losing their friends in this community. What can you offer them in terms of
They
that?
can, leaving MAGA has a lot of benefits to it. And I feel like people experience those benefits in different ways. For me, I became what I call a born again human being. I stopped vilifying people. I stopped dehumanizing people. I was able to reclaim my individuality. And I was able to see the world not as a black and white world, as I did in MAGA, but as a multicolored world. And I don't mean that even in a racial or ethnic context.
Mhm.
The the complexities of our democracy warrant us to be as open-minded and as unbiased as possible. That is not what being in MAGA is like. Being in MAGA is there's a worldview, we adhere to it, and we don't stray from it. So I think for those who have left or those who are having doubts, one goes through an entire transformation where re you have to reimagine yourself, and you need to change your belief system to find the new identity that we can integrate ourselves back into our democracy as opposed to this very insular movement of MAGA.